your book. I thank you for appearing with Steve and us tonight. Thank you so very much, Steve. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead and take over.
Oh, no, Tom. I don't know if you heard it, but I said it's interesting that the Lord has had you and I on parallel tracks, and that there's a destination. And I believe tonight is one of those, if you will, not only stage stops, but railroad stops to putting it all together for people. Because, Tom, you've been writing extensively. Our research has, if you will, paralleled each other for over a decade. And now we're at a point where the conclusions can no longer be denied. They have to be recognized, and they involve a response. So would you share, if you would, and then when you're ready to give it back to me so I don't interrupt you. I'm as excited, Tom, to hear what you have to say as I am to hear anything. And ladies and gentlemen, just so you know, Tom and I touch base through emails, but we don't get together ahead of time and discuss where we're going to go. So, Tom, what has the Lord specifically, your obviously work on the Vatican, the work that everything you've done with Apollyon 2012, the situation now, Zenith 2016, the concerns that you have are and wrote about prior to them happening. We just had the Pope of Rome, the Vicar of Christ, basically deny that the just shall live by faith, that there's salvation in Jesus Christ. And again, this is not, how should I say this, not to have been expected, because you wrote about it. So where are you at right now in drawing the conclusions of all your research? Because I did say all of that which you've done and I've done and all of us who've been doing this stuff for the decades is leading to a destination.
Absolutely, and thanks, Doug and Joe and Steve, for having me on the show with you. It's a real privilege always to be able to come on the show and talk with you guys. And a minute ago, Steve, when you said that our mutual research often dovetails, overlaps, corresponds with one another, what most people out there don't know is that when that has happened, it's never been because you and I are even talking to each other about it. It's just astonishing that I'll be over here doing some top-secret research, you're doing some top-secret research, and then about the same time we'll start broadcasting it, and more than once, both of us have just stood there and scratched our head and said, it's just astonishing how God was leading us down the same path at the same time. But, of course, we know that there is a biblical precedence for that, right? Out of the mouth of two witnesses. And I've always been very thankful for that. Steve, I would love to talk tonight about some current research I'm doing with an old friend of yours. Former police detective Terry Cook and I have been doing some more of that top-secret research over the last year, looking into what we are calling beast tech, because it involves something I want to talk about tonight concerning the coming mark of the beast, but it also includes more than that, the actual program, the system of the Antichrist. So we'll see how much of that we can get through. And then ultimately, I'd also like to talk later tonight, if we can, about some of that parallel research that you and I have been doing. Your book, True Legends, that you were writing and we were unaware of, about the same time we were writing Exo Vaticana, a large part of which is a study into the increase in hyperdimensional entity appearances, which has happened throughout history, but currently seems to be happening more and more all around the world as the veil between our worlds gets thinner, right?
Absolutely, and just as you've been detailing it, writing about it, I honestly believe that we're living the chapters of Apollyon 2012. True Legends, Tom. I mean, even 2 days ago, I was contacted by a woman, and I'll be sending you all of her photographs and footprints of interdimensional big feet literally harassing this poor woman and her daughter. And let me say this, by anyone's standards, it is absolutely not only bona fide, but it is more evidence that Bigfoot and big feet, whatever the plural is, the bottom line is there is so much hyperdimensional activity that tonight I think people will understand. And the neat thing is there's power in the blood of Jesus. God's word is true, but we have to warn the people, and not only warn the people, but again, we're giving them the antidote for fear. So take it, Tom, and when you're done, hand it back.
All right. Well, Steve, as you know, and as Doug and Joe Hagman probably don't know unless you shared that with them, privately. I was actually visited about 10 days ago now by the Department of Homeland Security that actually came to my home. And then, I don't think I told you this, I may have, but a couple days after that visit, a small Department of Homeland Security-like white Cessna circled the top of my property for hours on one given day, and I actually drove out into the middle of one of my fields and looked up at them and watched them as they kept flying over and then skirting alongside where I was and looking down at me with their binoculars out of this plane. So, but now I cannot discuss the details of the visit that was made to my house, but what I can assure people was that it wasn't because Tom Horn was doing anything illegal. I can tell you this much, what it had to do with was a legitimate business transaction between myself and a person in another country. And the person in the other country is, I don't know if they're maybe involved with something, I don't know what, but it threw up some kind of a red flag. And so I had this badges out visit to my home, and before they left, the DHS was asking me if I would be willing to alert them to certain types of contacts that could be made with either myself or my company, and let's say, in their opinion, suspicious types that might be seeking some kind of intelligence. But what that visit made me realize or feel, Steve, Doug, and Joe, is that there's something big. That's the feeling. And my son, he's my business manager, was standing outside with me as we had this visit. We didn't let him inside the house, but we were left with the sense that something really big is up, and they're not about to let us know what it is, but that U.S. intelligence agencies are now taking these extraordinary measures to try to cover as much ground as they can and to gather as much intel as they can between legitimate businesses and business people like myself that it sounded like they think could be targeted for what? Some kind of information, some way to establish maybe a business inroad into the country that they then somehow use to try to legitimize themselves. That part was really unclear, but what they wanted us to do, what they asked us to do, was to make them aware of any particular certain kinds of contact that I probably shouldn't talk about. One thing I would tell you to note, which is a public news story, so I can say that much, you notice today that there is a major security story about how the U.S. Department of Defense is ordering a security review at all of its military and government facilities worldwide. Have you saw those articles today? Well, am I still on?
Oh, yeah, you are. I'm sorry. Yeah, we did see those articles, and it's interesting timing, to say the least. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, because what they're saying is that they've ordered these security reviews at all of the government facilities and military facilities because they're saying, it has to do with the massacre there at Washington Navy Yard a few days ago, and that Aaron Alexis, or whatever his name was, killed 12 people. But the visit that came to me was at least a week before that event, and it echoed a lot of the same kind of information. So what I'm saying is there is something that is up. Now,
Tom, if I can ask you this, because badges out, DHS, look, I fully comprehend that, believe me, on a personal level. But that said, what was the purpose of the flyover?
I have no idea.
Yeah, that doesn't.
I have no idea.
That kind of seems like it's out from, pardon the expression, from left field.
Well, I have a 150-acre ranch. And so they were literally doing a perimeter fly-around over and over and over and over, and I have no idea what whoever they were, but you know, you've seen the DHS planes.
Yeah.
They're just the white Cessnas with the marking on the side. Whatever they were doing, whatever they wanted, I don't have any clue. I didn't wave at them, but I sat there and watched them, and they watched me, right?
Well, I think Steve might have waved at him, but in the past. But yeah. Wow.
Well, and right at first, I thought, is this Gary Stearman? Is this Steve Quayle? Is this somebody, you know, that's coming to check? But then I started, you know, watching the markings on the plane and the color of the plane, and, you know, that's typical. But here's the deal. I know it's National Preparedness Month, and, you know, during this time of the year, you get all these agencies, they get nervous, and I can tell you that even before I was visited, we were experiencing much larger orders this time of the year at Survivor Mall of things like gas masks and potassium iodide and long-term storage foods. I'm sure Steve has been experiencing the same thing at his preparedness store at stevequayle.com. And so it could be that it's just Preparedness Month awareness, and so they're taking these heightened measures to try to reach out to business people like myself and I do business with people all over the world, and we're very aware of the things that we can't ship into other countries, right, like weapons and things like that, so we don't. And we follow all of the rules. We know all the states, for instance, in the U.S. where we can't sell, you know, stun guns and pepper spray, and so those are all blacklisted, and everybody that works in the warehouse knows. So we follow the rules so that we don't get into issues where you have something that's getting hung up, you know, in customs or whatever because it's not supposed to be sent into another country. This was different, and we were just told, would you be willing if you get strange contacts? And it seems like they were using this business transaction really as more of an excuse, in the same way that I think this whole Aaron Alexis killing spree at the Naval Yard is being right now as to put a public face on something, so that when people in communities where these military bases and these government bases are at see all of the increased security around it, it's a way of providing, you know, through the media, kind of a you know, an explanation about what they are doing. But I think there are people out there right now that are aware of or that are suspicious of some kind of either large-scale attack that's being planned or multiple attacks that are being planned or something like that. You know, the Al-Qaeda chief, what is his name, Ayman al-Zawahiri, he released that audio message like last Friday saying that the time is right now for large-scale terror attacks inside the United States. Those are signals. A lot of times it isn't just general conversation, hey, we think it'd be a good idea, what can you dream up to go hit somebody? What they have is they have people out there that have been planning events for a long time, and these people are just sitting there like idling trucks waiting for the signal. And then somebody like this Zawahiri goes on and says the time is right now for large-scale terror attacks inside the U.S., and then he urges his fellow members of his extremist groups to start seizing opportunity, you know, to conduct either opportunistic or perhaps large-scale strikes against the United States. And it could be something like that. Whatever it is, by the way, I'm glad that smart people are taking measures to survive whatever may come. Even people that don't have a lot of money, you know, can afford to buy inexpensive gas masks. They can buy potassium iodide, which costs $10 or $12 and could keep them alive. That kind of thing. Steve, what are you hearing, if anything? Are people that you know in the military or in other intelligence agencies or that have security clearance, are you hearing anything being said, brewing among these agencies, like they're hearing chatter that has persuaded them that something is amiss in the U.S. or might be? Is Steve still there?
Steve, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I heard what you said, Tom. The problem that I see, and actually, let me just read two of them that everybody who's listening to the show tonight have to have this in real time. The Bible says, "The mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established." When two people from different parts of the United States share the same, almost word-for-word warning or alert coming from different situations, how about this one? Dear Steve, this will answer your question specifically, Tom, and this is something everyone needs to hear. My fiancée and I are getting married tomorrow. She's in the U.S. Air Force. We were out getting some last-minute items for the wedding. When we pulled up to our house, my fiancée's boss and staff sergeant were at the door to notify her that their unit is going on standby on Monday the 23rd. When she asked her sergeant why, he said because, and he said the S word, is going down in Syria. These were his exact words, Steve, not mine. He didn't divulge any more details, probably because I was standing there. They were just here an hour ago, and today's date is Friday, September 20th. Now listen to this. Second witness. These came in about 3 hours apart. A Kansas farmer called me 20 minutes ago to tell me that his father, injured in an accident, was in a coma. The family was called back for a bedside vigil. The tough old guy survived. One of the family members is a high-ranking Air Force officer. He informed his family that he'd been called back to West Virginia and that he was to report tomorrow, same time that they're both to report. His only statement was, something really big is about to happen. This is not good. He gave no further information. And then Greg sent this to me. He said, speculation, the underground command complex is there in the Blue Ridge Mountains. This officer was agitated. So to answer your question, Tom, and for the sake of everyone listening, I don't know, do I sit on information like that, or do I post it and tell people that, look, it's up to you to take it to the Lord. But based on all of my sources, they're all saying the same thing you said. Something big is up. They know it's coming. And look, here is the quintessential hypocrisy going on in this country right now. How is it that we're sponsoring Al-Qaeda, giving them weapons in Syria and everything, and then Zawahiri, who I am more than familiar with on an amazing level, and I'll leave it at that, is calling for the total, and by the way, as you said, Tom, when these guys go on and give a statement like that, that's a message. It is so analyzed by everybody in the NSA and CIA and every they look at his body motion, his movements. Doug, these guys have this guy figured out, but these guys are pros. So to make a long story short, he gave a go signal. And with the Syrian contact in, my guess is this, and here's just an educated guess. Obviously, through Russian intelligence, through Chinese intelligence, through all the different chatter back and forth between the intel agencies, Agent B, who knows Agent A from the Cold War, they know the plan is to go ahead and proceed against Syria. Doesn't matter what the UN says, doesn't matter anything. Given that fact, then I would guess that sleeper cells have been activated, and that would explain a lot of the heightened state of alert, and so much so that if I didn't know better, I would say that most of the military equipment across the country is anticipating more than just, quote, angry patriots. In other words, this is very serious, and again, what we're talking about tonight, now, Tom, I want to jump to something, the portals that you have written about, the gates of hell, which you taught me about. I am seeing so many reports of preternatural, supernatural, demonic, UFO. That, in essence, what we were telling would be the key signature of things getting ready to break loose and all, quote, unquote, hell on earth. I see those in real time now. I'm getting those in hourly reports, and one's only 150 air miles directly south by southeast of me. So the thing is that what I'm hearing in talking to my researcher, Mac, in Arizona, one of the guys that helped me with True Legends, he did a marvelous job for me, and others who are around Native Americans, whether it's Brother Marcus Samuel out in South Dakota, the guys who are on the reservations up north in Montana, they're all claiming that the presence of supernatural evil is beyond anything, and even the elders are commenting and letting it be known that there is a shift, there is a change, and in essence, the doors are open.
Wow.
Now, Steve, I would like to, there's two things that I'm hoping we'll be able to talk about tonight. One is what you just were talking about, and the other is what type of event, potentially a terrorist event or some other kind of event, a black ops operation that's actually set in motion, which we know our own, our CIA has started wars in more than just Syria, as they may happen to be considering it right now in the past, something like that. In fact, the title of this new book, Zenith 2016, the idea that something started in the year 2012, and it's going to very quickly ratchet up until something explosive is occurring in the year 2016. It involves two different kinds of things. One is geopolitical. It involves governments. It involves all-pervasive surveillance. It involves putting people in a position where they cannot say no. In other words, they are caused, as Revelation says, to receive a mark or a system that then is going to bring them into this all-inclusive socialistic kind of antichrist system. I want to talk about that, but the other side of this is also 2012 to 2016, which means that a gateway is open. And the further that gate opens, I mean, you can imagine a door opening that's got a light behind it or that's got darkness behind it, and the more it opens, the more you can see of it. And I really feel that right now, and I was with Gary Stearman yesterday in Oklahoma City. We recorded a couple of shows, and Gary said that they're probably the best shows that he has ever done with me at Prophecy in the News. Now, not Steve Quayle level good, like I heard all about while I was down there, but probably he said the best. And this is what we were talking about, that something started, it's ratcheting up very quickly. It even has people like Gary Stearman and others who are usually, I mean, they're very calm and collective, but I mean, they're really on edge right now, because in the spiritual side of this, they can sense that something is racing now towards a moment, towards an event, and I think we all know where it's heading. So in very general terms, I'd really like to talk about both, and we can go to either one of them before the other, but I want to talk about basically the Mark of the Beast system, but not the Mark of the Beast. I want to talk about what are the events that may be imminent right now that will set in motion a system from which the average person is not going to have the strength to resist, and then the other supernatural side of it that's going to put fear in the hearts of men as they see these things coming upon the earth. Which way do you want to go with this first?
Let's take the bottom line and let's go with the things that could put fear in the hearts of men, because the bottom line is, Tom, I had been praying, and I know there's so many intercessors praying for tonight's show. You know, Jesus said this marvelous statement, and everything that Jesus said at the moment, the scripture that's the best in the Bible is the one we need for the moment, and it's all necessary for life. But, you know, Jesus said men's hearts failing them for looking after those things coming upon the earth. And also that I use it all the time because I said, Lord, how do we take the people into the point you want them to understand the true nature of the spiritual battle that's against them? I mean, Syria, bombs, rockets, exocet missiles, super sunburn, squall. All this is relevant in the physical war. But let's go with the supernatural right now, Tom, because I think that's the thing that we're faced with immediately. Because again, and Jesus said, if I told you earthly things you believe me not, how can I tell you heavenly things? My question to the Lord in prayer all the time is, Lord, help us to articulate those who have called to warn, those who have done their homework to warn, those who have prepared the way to warn. How do we get them to understand that what they can't see, they will soon see? What they maybe have denied will become a present reality. I remember years ago, I can't find it, a prophecy God gave me 5 years ago, that the invisible will become visible and the stuff of men's nightmares would be manifest in their present material world. So let's go there and let's go to your bottom line, and then we'll work backwards.
Okay, and then we'll work backwards. And the other is also spiritual because it involves, I think, well, first of all, it involves information that we have received that we're going to publicize, and this may really cause the you-know-what to hit the fan, photocopies and transcripts of information that involve a government program that you can only think of as the implementation of the mark of the beast by the year 2017. So we'll talk about that hopefully sometime tonight. But right now, yeah, this research that you and I did into hyperdimensional entity appearances in ancient times, I did read your book. We did write a review of True Legends for Raiders News Update. It is one of the best. You always write great, but this, I think, is one of your best, Steve. Between it and the Giants book, those are my all-time two favorites. But as I was reading through True Legends, I couldn't help but have at the forefront of my thoughts the fact that Chris Putnam and I had just, earlier this year and late last year gone to Arizona, and we went up there to the Vatican's, astronomical research laboratory. But when we anyway, isn't that awful? My mind. Tell me what's on the top of Mount Graham. The Vatican.
Well, the Lucifer telescope.
Yeah, well, anyway, their telescope, that's what I was trying to say. But it was when we came down off of Mount Graham, and we were talking about this actually on Hagman and Hagman, and we did the show with you. And right after we did that show with you, I'm going to make this public at some point very soon. But a guy contacted me, and he said, you're talking about how this guy's an American Indian. He said, you're talking about how the American Indians view that as one of the four holiest mountains in the United States because they see it essentially as what you would call a stargate. He said, that's what you were talking about when you and Steve were on the radio. He said, I can tell you that it not only is that true, not only was it true, it's still true. Most of the American Indians that live in that area still believe that. And his mother, who is an Indian, has lived there for, I think he said, 55 years or something, most of her adult life. And well, guess what? She keeps cameras set up all the time, 24 hours a day, and you won't believe some of the video that they sent me with, you can only call these things like, giant sprites? These lights that appear on the side of that mountain and that move about. I mean, it's very much UFO-like activity. But she also one night caught a very large circular disc-like thing that came down, hovered over the top of the Vatican Observatory Research Group's systems up there, and sat there for a while and then moved back up off and disappeared into the clouds. Just the most astonishing video. So as soon as we can get this current documentary called Inhuman, which we'll probably talk about some of that kind of stuff tonight as far as transhumanism, but as soon as we can get that in place, we already are interviewing different people on what we're probably going to call Exo-Vaticana, the movie, but it's actually based on that mountain and what's going on up there and some of the similar research related to what you and I have done, in which we've discussed this biblical reality that there are other dimensional entities. And they have the ability, under certain circumstances, to move from their dimension, their reality, into ours. And the Bible, despite what some of the naysayers may say, is literally filled with examples and references to that dynamic. In fact, here the other day, I was reading again the story of Jesus going into Gadara, and something kind of stood out to me a little different as I was reading this in the Greek language. He arrives, right, and the wild man of Gadara comes out there screaming, "What have I to do with thee, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not." Those entities, that first of all, they recognized him as the Son of God, but they feared that he was going to command them to do something. Now, in most Bibles, it says that they pleaded with him not to send them, quote, out of the country. But read that in the Greek language, because essentially, or literally what they said was, don't send us out of the space between two places or limits. Now that is interesting, because the word there in the Hebrew, it's a noun, korah, and it has as its first meaning the space between two places. In other words, it's a dimensional reality, and they were afraid that he was going to send them out of that dimensional domain. Now, there's a reason to believe, as we move further into these current days, between now and 2016, or so long as the Lord should tarry. I'm not setting any dates, and I know you don't either. But there's a reason to believe that those kind of increased sightings of strange phenomena, like we now have on film below Mount Graham, and not only those kind of sightings, but the hearing of sounds, right? Like the clanking of metal. Gary Stearman and I were talking yesterday about some of the emails, Steve, that you had sent me about like these humming sounds that people are hearing all over the place, and how it makes them feel, and how it seems to impact, like upon their skin, like it's affecting them somehow. And then somebody sent me this clinking sound, and the minute that I heard this large clinking sound, the thought that just jumped into my mind, I have no idea, by the way, if this has anything to do with reality, but it sounded like, when you've seen movies where you see these Roman swords crashing against somebody's armor. It sounded just like that, and I just had a cold chill go up my spine, and I told Gary, I said, man alive, I said, what are we hearing in these sounds that are being heard all over the world and recorded now all over the world? I mean, is it too much to imagine, Steve, that we might be hearing like other dimensional warfare, like angelic warfare, because we're moving towards that moment when we know that Michael and his archangel, they're in great war with the dragon and his angels. We know that we're headed towards that conflict, right?
Absolutely. And I echo those sentiments because, again, what's interesting is that God spoke the worlds into existence, and the thing I'm working on right now is the sound of creation and the different interplay between sound, magnetism, and as it relates to spiritual world. But what was fascinating, Tom, in talking to all the different people that have been interviewed when it comes to, and I'll just bring up Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, whatever you want to call them, it's the sonic nature that opens the gate. Now jump to the great structures of history and the harmonic, which means vibrational frequencies, levitation of amazingly heavy. In other words, sound can overcome magnetism. Sound has basically been something that the ancients understood to an infinite degree. So here's what I'm saying, and I will be making a more further statement. I don't want to make a statement yet. I'm not ready to, but I think people are going to be blown away because the area that is being opened to me and I believe it's the leading of the Holy Ghost to warn His people is that when you're dealing with the book of Revelation, you're dealing with trumpets. You're dealing with thunders. We're dealing with the voice of the Lord. And if you look up the voice of the Lord in the Hebrew Strong's Concordance, you'll find out the voice of the Lord is an amazing thing. And it's that voice of the Lord. So just as Paul says there are many voices, and they all are to some effect in the New Testament, we're hearing sounds, in my opinion, that are gates opening, that are swords clashing, it's the earth groaning, that it's the methane, as Doug Wayne explained to me, that it's a methane too bubbling up from under pressure at 5 miles deep, coming up even through things like wellheads. And if you take the wellheads, listen to this, you guys, this will blow your mind. Thank you, Wayne. The wellheads are acting almost as a cacophonic organ from, and this is my words, not his, but from the dark side, and the different diameters of those wellheads, the pipe that goes down that they pump the natural gas or oil on. So what I'm saying is that when the scripture, you're going to love this, when all creation travails for the manifestation, that word travailing literally means howl, weeps, it groans, okay? And so this is what's going on. These are in time noises that are the signature of, and I'll make it simple, heaven breaking forth, all hell breaking loose. Now, isn't that amazing, Tom?
Absolutely, and there are words in the original biblical texts that actually describe some of the activity that you're describing right now. For instance, there's actually a word, it's a combination of words, in the Greek Bible that discusses how these other dimensional reality, how these other dimensional entities come through into our three-dimensional reality. For instance, there is a word, it's two words, but it's meta, and then it's schematizo. And you can read that in 2 Corinthians 11:14, where it's talking about Satan as able to masquerade or to transfigure into an angel of light. It kind of describes the meta activity that is occurring as he moves from his dimension into ours and takes on a particular, and in this case, a deceptive physical form, something that can be seen. I was talking to Russ Dizdar in Colorado not long ago at the conference there, and we were talking about that, and he calls that the physics of the dark side. Literally, the ability to transmute or to morph their appearance from their dimension to ours while maintaining their evil nature but cloaking it in a different kind of manifestation. So whether they come through and they appear as an ascended master or a regular human or an alien gray or a Bigfoot or a Loch Ness or whatever, they come through, they can appear in whatever these ways they want to, but they are masking some other kind of reality, which is what they really are. Now, of course, we know that good angels can also come through, and they too sometimes can appear different than what they appear to be on the other side. Some of them are even indistinguishable from humans. Another thing, Steve, when Jesus said of certain demons in Mark 9:29, he said, "This kind cometh forth by nothing but prayer and fasting." And the word there, kind, is genos. You probably know that because of all the research you've done into genetics, but it literally means a genetic kind, and it sometimes can be translated species. So it tells us there are different types of these ultra-dimensional beings, but it implies that that's perhaps not only true in terms of their level of power, but also in their appearance, that in that other reality, there are those that look different than other ones, leftovers maybe, of the Watcher experiments involving these human-animal combinations that in some way continues to resemble their earthly composition before the flood, but now it's how they also are known in that reality. So perhaps over there, they look like Bigfoot, or they look like whatever. And that has biblical merit, because recall, as Jesus was similar in appearance after the resurrection, right? And also Paul told the Corinthians that in the next life, we too will be known, quote, even as we are known. So there is some sense that whatever those mutations were that were created in all these horrific experiments that are, I think, kind of, you have echo traces of them that are recorded in like the Greek mythologies and the Egyptian mythologies. So you have the body of a horse but the torso of a man, or the head of an ibis and the body of a man, or whatever. Those are like mute testimonies of something that happened at one time, and so they created these records. But perhaps in these other realities, you have these big, ugly, terrible-looking things that when they appear on this side, they may look like Bigfoot, but they may also have the capacity to metaschematizo, to make themselves appear as something different. And now it's a lovely, large, what do they call them? The Nordic aliens, right? Big, beautiful woman or big, beautiful man that is coming through this reality. But maybe if you could see them for what they really are, it would be so demonic and horrific that then, of course, it would cause that individual who's being visited to run away or to rebuke them in the name of Jesus Christ or whatever. But because they appear to be beautiful, they come as an angel of light. Another thing, Steve, about your book, True Legends, and about these entities that can come through into our reality by some Russ Dizdar's, physics of the dark world. Have you ever thought of the prophecy of the 4 horses in Revelation chapter 6? And when the pale horse rides in, notice what it says of him here. I'll just read it. Revelation 6:8. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. Now let me stop and interrupt myself for a second. I want to quote this because a little bit later tonight, when we start talking about these events that may be imminent and that ultimately could lead to the arrival of both the Antichrist, the false prophet, who could certainly be alive and on earth right now, just awaiting the moment that they get their marching orders from the spirit behind the man of sin. We're going to see the rapid rolling out of the fulfillment of the book of Revelation. So what might be just around the corner? Let me go back to my quote, Revelation 6:8. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto him over the fourth part of the earth. Now note what it says. To kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and note this, and with the beasts of the earth, end quote. Now, Steve, I do not believe that this text is implying that tomorrow morning my goldfish or my gerbil may suddenly go crazy and start attacking me. The word here for beasts of the earth is an important word. It's the Greek word therion. And people need to memorize this term because therion, it's a strange but interesting word because it refers not only to a wild or violent beast, but it refers to a strange and violent bestial man. As a matter of fact, people listening to this show can even go to like the Strong's Concordance online and look up that text and then click on the word therion and notice how it is described as a brutal, bestial man, savage and ferocious, end quote. Now, people should consider that when the Bible prophesies that the pale horse rider rides, and now people are being killed with sword and with hunger and with death and with therion, brutal, bestial men, savage and ferocious, that this is going to be part of how a third part of the earth is destroyed. And I've always believed that the Bible means what it says. It kind of reminds of a conversation you and I had in one of the radio shows that we did a few years ago where we were talking about that army in the second chapter of the book of Joel, and a parallel in Revelation 9 that sounds like kind of an end times volcano of hybrids, and other Isaiah 13, other places, which talks about the fact that a moment is coming. And Syria being threatened is not only prophetic, it's part of those prophecies from the book of Isaiah, that if you continue reading the text, goes on to talk about how a gate's going to open and giants are going to come forth upon the earth, and even a hybrid, mythological, like part human, part animal creatures are going to be there, not just in Syria and Damascus, but also in ancient Babylon. So that people know what I'm talking about here with Job. Am I just going on and on too much?
No, this is really critical. And Tom, years ago, I coined a term which is so parallel to what you're doing. It's called T, Tango, M, obviously, Mary, D, Delta, E, Echo, TMDE, and that's transmorphic demonic entities. And what I have written about extensively, and this is really, standard word shapeshifters, but what is interesting to me is that when the genetic corruption of not only humanity, but also of all creation, that's what the Book of Giants, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the fragments, and by the way, that's reprinted, all there is that I have or anybody has, with the exception of the Illuminati, is reprinted in my book, True Legends. But what it shows is that when that corruption took place of the angelic genome, fallen angels, intermixing itself with whether it was reptiles, whether it was birds, bees, fish, you name it, every myth and every legend. And I got to say this: after 40 years, I will not say that there is no visible, viable intellectual challenge to this statement. In history, in antiquity, and myth and legend, it all has to do with the gods, the fallen angels, mingling, genetically manipulating not only the human genome, but the animal kingdom, to the point where it repented God that he had created man. And he even wiped out a lot of his creation. That's why bestiality is so forbidden in the Old Testament, the penalty being death. And now we've got, I don't know what you call them, and pun intended, but you've got cat houses in Germany where people go to have, sexual relationships with animals. If this isn't the appetites of demons being expressed through humans, I don't know what is. So this is what Jesus is talking about. And can I ask you a question? I've never asked you this on the air or even privately. Do you ever feel frustrated at the depth of the revelation that the Lord, and it's God's revelation, a man has nothing except to receive it from above, and the frustration of seeing what's coming, yet the apparent denial of the things that are obvious in the natural realm? And I believe God's called you and I, and I'm not separating us, making us better, but we've been called independently and now as a cohesive unit to prepare the people for the war that's coming against them from the spirit realm. Do you ever just sometimes marvel at that?
Well, of course I do, and I have to say I'm also humbled by it. It's the kind of a thing that can bring you to your knees, because I don't think myself or yourself or anybody like us or anybody that's in these circles would take to ourselves anything special about that. It's actually kind of like a burden. John on the island of Patmos, take this book and eat it up, and it's sweet like honey in his belly, in his mouth, but it becomes bitterness in his belly. And you look at all of the prophets all the way back to Moses. Here I am, Lord, send my brother-in-law, or whatever. It's difficult. It's a struggle. But all of the prophets, all of the people who had prophetic callings in the Bible, it seems like, at times wanted to run away from that calling. So whether it's Jonah being swallowed by a whale and spat out because he just doesn't want to have to do the job of prophecy, or what you and I do today, knowing that we're going to be on this radio show and we're talking about these issues, and we know that it will be helpful to a lot of people, but we also know there's that other element out there, right? And they're sitting there right now blogging and talking, and how in the world can we figure out some way to discredit what these guys are saying? We know that battle is ongoing, and by the way, it's not going to get better. It's going to get a whole lot worse. And if we have a chance later tonight, I want to talk about the war that I think is coming, and it is going to involve the institution of the church, not the mystical body of Christ, but the institution of the church, where brother will be set against brother in the very institutionalized sense of the word. That's already happening. It's happening right now, but I think it's going to get much, much worse.
Let's take that on in the second hour now. Joe and Doug, do we need to take a break right now?
Yeah, we're up against stuff.
We can.
Okay, and Tom, when we come back, let's go directly into that, because that's critical. Because I am seeing, and listen, I want to make this clear: neither Tom Horn nor I are Catholic bashers. We are absolute, and I would call us investigative truth heralders. Okay. I've never used that term before.
I like that.
The point is that there's going to be a battle in all realms and dimensions. And when we come back, Tom, I want to get right into that thing, because that's so critical to understand, because it's going to be not only a daily occurrence, but it's going to be an hourly occurrence, and brother is going to be set against brother. So can we take that up when we come back?
Sure.
You get my brother.
Well, I want to turn it right over to Tom, because this is critical. Doug, when we're talking about war, we're talking about supernatural entities that have been in control of esoteric knowledge for literally millennia, even prior to the creation of Adam and Eve. And the adepts, the priests, what I call the Egyptian priesthood, you can call it the Brotherhood of Death, whatever. But it's critical to understand that when Tom and his research turned up what they turned up, the thing that caused the greatest shock to my system was when talking to the astronomers that Tom interviewed and all these things. This is critical for people to understand. These gentlemen are looking for the return of Lucifer even to the description from prior to the Middle Ages of bat-like wings and the caricatures that we all associate with the devil. Now, saying that, obviously, the Bible teaches he can transform himself into whatever form and shape, but God ultimately is the one that strips him. And that's why discernment is important. So, Tom, I just want you to take the next, however, 20, 30 minutes. If you want to give it back to me at any point, take a break, and I'll give it right back. But what you are talking about that I ask you to take in now is critical. The coming war. Go ahead and take it wherever you want, my brother, because this is so important tonight, because all truth is parallel. We could be at war in the next, and I'm not setting a date, but let's say in the next 2 weeks, beyond anything we know, with all the call-ups, the positioning, all the worry, the discernment, the collective unease, and the mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, that's going on. So will you just take it from here, Tom, and share the bottom line, your heart, and, not how you arrived at it, because we got to give people a maximum dose of reality. That's an MDOR, okay?
Absolutely, Steve. What I want to do, and thank you for giving me this segment or part of this segment to discuss several things. I'll try to be methodical and try to get to the various points, but something big is coming. It does involve the war of wars, and I believe that we're on the precipice of it right now. So I'm going to tell people about a secret project that's underway to bring about the dreaded mark of the beast. I also want to talk about the stratagems that I believe are going to be used to initiate it. And then ultimately, I want to use that as the precipice to describe the war that is not just going to be a war between good and evil. Well, I guess it is a war between good and evil, but on the surface it might not appear to be, because it's also going to include believers against believers. And I'm talking about some of the most well-known Christian ministries in the world that are going to be set against guys like Steve Quayle and Tom Horn. So first of all, Doug, my new book, Zenith 2016, if you'll remind me after the show, I'll have somebody send that to you. It is creating a bit of a stir because it talks about some of this stuff. Now, right now, today, it's creating a stir, of course, because over there on the top of RaidersNewsUpdate.com, it's telling, it's advertising that a hidden anagram that has to do with all this stuff is going to be posted in 4 days from now. I'm going to give somebody $10,000 of my own money. Who in the world thought that was a good idea? Oh, man, and then some shopping sprees so people can use that to actually buy some of those preparedness items, all that. But anyway, I don't even want to go into why we did that. But something is coming. To be more specific, something actually already started. And when you read the book, you will find out that it started in the year 2012, but it is ratcheting towards 2016, 2017, 2018. By the way, 2018 is the 70th year anniversary of the nation of Israel coming back together in 1948. We're going to have blood moons between now and that period of time. Just an enormous amount of prophetic possibilities, and we'll try to go through those as quickly as we can, one at a time. So, one interviewer asked me the other day. He had read the book, and then he said, if something really does happen in 2016, as in the Antichrist is manifest. Now, first of all, people listening to this show, those were his words and not mine. So keep that in mind. But he said, if the Antichrist is made manifest in 2016, what would that mean for 2017? And I'll tell you what I told him, that the work I'm doing right now with former police investigator Terry Cook, we have in our possession. We're going to make this public soon. We're going to start probably this weekend, a brand new series at Raiders News Update called Beast Tech. We're going to make this information public. But there is a government plan. Now, this is not conspiracy talk. This is a legitimate U.S. government project that is in place right now, and it involves a federally subsidized project in 2017 to implement what can only be thought of as wide-scale human microchipping. According to the photocopied and transcript information, it's going to be a voluntary procedure. But what is important about this is it also includes language that admits that there could be a trigger event, there could be something that would happen that then could eventually cause this program to turn into something that is not voluntary. And so we are going to be talking about that at Raiders News Update. I wanted you to be aware of that because I can hear people's thoughts already, and they would be asking themselves, how in the world could a federally mandated, microchip or smart tattoo or some other version of the mark of the beast, how could that be employed practically overnight, basically in a heartbeat, in which it then requires everybody to participate in it? Let's see, where do I want to go? That question would be legitimate. But I want people to think. Okay, I want people to think about this primary question. Excuse me.
Yeah, no, Tom. It just makes me wonder when you had said that, when you had made that statement, that broad statement that this could be done so quickly, and the infrastructure appears there. Man, that got my attention because we talk about this all the time, and so we're waiting with anticipation in terms of how you think this will play out. And I know that Steve has talked about this. And from what I've seen, by the way, on the two different, from an investigative viewpoint, what Steve has done and what you've done, man, you're like two roads going right down the same path, side by side. So go ahead and continue. I just wanted to say that I'm interested with this, how this is going to happen.
Well, when I do shows with Steve especially, Steve is always, if you listen to him, he is always quoting Scripture. He is always backing up what he's talking about in terms of providing biblical exegesis to support his own conclusions or his own findings. And so I would want to ask the same kind of question and tell people to note how, if you ask the question, what kind of a trigger event could occur, maybe soon occur, that would essentially make a 666 mandatory system occur overnight? What in the world could happen? In the book of Revelation, 13:16, it says, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name." The phrasing in that verse is really important because the Greek verb for causeth is poio, and what it implies is something is suddenly set in motion by the instigator of an event. Now, in this case, of course, it would be the Antichrist, which then triggers others to have to respond to it. In other words, you cannot be a casual observer. Something is triggered, an event occurs, and you have to respond to it. Now, one wonders, when looking at Revelation 13:16, what could the Antichrist initiate that would result in the majority of the global population making this sudden decision to accept his mark? I mean, it'd have to be something extraordinary, right? To put so much pressure on freedom-loving people around the world, especially, here in the United States or in Judeo-Christian cultures, to cause so many of them to lay aside their personal freedoms and their eternal salvation in exchange for this Orwellian society where now the one world government's going to oversee the details of their lives and their liberty is going to be abandoned. This was always an issue to me. I mean, what in the world could happen, right? Because I cherish the idea of free moral agency. I cherish the idea of our Constitution and Bill of Rights freedoms, which right now, of course, are under assault, not just daily, but hourly. But I've always thought when the Antichrist system comes, this is not going to be an easy task. It's going to necessitate a global scale incident that then will set in motion what Revelation calls the man of sin's cause. He causeth all. Somehow, something that overwhelms the average person's ability to resist receiving the mark of the beast. Now, I had a feeling, I'm not going back here, but I had a feeling when the DHS visited me, I had a feeling that I was only one of thousands because United States intelligence is aware of, considering something, and it might actually involve a global-scale incident that maybe sooner than most people expect could set in motion that event, a far-reaching scenario. So what could it be? Now, there's a lot of prospects, but I want to just give you three really fast possibilities. These are probably things you guys have discussed, and it'd be great to have you weigh in on it. Number one would be an EMP or cyber attack, or both. Number two would be a global economic meltdown. Number three, a natural or manufactured global pandemic, the development of which I happen to believe most directly connects to the possibility of the mark of the beast. Of course, it could be all three of those incidents all at one time. All right, so what could set in motion overnight a reality that would then bring about immediately a beastly system that would bring the world to its knees? For, scenario number one that I mentioned, electromagnetic or a cyber warfare event. How so? Most government experts today in fields of risk mitigation are focused on likely terrorist or perhaps enemy state-sponsored scenarios that could take advantage, right, of our aging electrical and water systems infrastructure. For instance, you could either have a false flag event or a rogue nation that could load these so-called defensive missiles with nuclear warheads and launch them and use them as not impact weapons, but electromagnetic pulse weapons, HIMPs, that go off above particular cities. They would target, of course, critical cities where we've got energy sources, oil and natural gas pipelines, water delivery systems, banking and financial systems. They would target these very particular systems, and they would only need to launch. I mean, these guys could just be offshore in a freighter. And anybody that thinks, oh, our man, 200 miles offshore the United States, we've got that stuff so protected, there's no way in the world that anybody could ever get out there and have any of these kind of warheads, that they've tipped with nuclear weapons, and now, they're going to launch them as multiple electromagnetic pulse weapons where they're going to go off above particular cities. Never happen. Our security's too good. Well, anybody that believes that doesn't pay very much attention to the news, because we are constantly having even drug runners who are bringing these ships into our systems. We are constantly picking up submarines. Russia, just what was it, last year or year before, Steve, where they had several of their vessels that were only picked up like at the last minute that were encroaching into that 200-mile perimeter. And those ICBMs, they have much further than 200-mile distance capabilities. And I was talking to a guy in the military, and he said in military terminology, if what you're talking about, if a nuclear warhead was detonated hundreds of kilometers above the Earth's surface, it'd be known as what he called a HEMP, H-E-M-P, a high-altitude electromagnetic pulse device. And that device would produce gamma rays that then in turn are converted into EMPs in the mid-stratosphere, blah, blah, blah. It literally could bring, if they targeted just a few U.S. cities that are well-known energy hubs, it could literally in a flash bring the United States of America to its knees and knock us back into the dark ages. Now, I should also point out that this isn't just Tom Horn's private opinion. There have been warnings issued recently by the U.S. Department of Defense, again, Homeland Security, even President Obama, involving the risk associated with nations like China that are right now testing U.S. electrical infrastructure vulnerability through cyber attacks that are actually aimed at determining how to sabotage our power grid, our financial institutions, even air traffic control systems. That's happening right now. In fact, there was an article recently by Michael Malouf, and every time he writes something, I go there to read it because he's a writer for WorldNet Daily, but he's a former senior security policy analyst from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And now he's a current, of course, staff writer for WorldNet Daily and the G2 Bulletin. Joseph Ferris works over there. But he wrote an article recently, and it was called Sledgehammer of Cyber Warfare, EMP Attack. And let me give you just a quick quote out of this article. Quote, those same adversaries, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, also incorporate in their military doctrine the use of nuclear electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, attack as part of a strategic operation that would basically throw the kitchen sink at the United States. According to Cynthia E. Ayers, who once was the National Security Agency and currently is with the U.S. Army War College, these countries, she said, will hit us with everything. Computer viruses, sabotage of critical communication nodes, kinetic strikes on key information systems, and a nuclear EMP attack. The last, an EMP, is their, she said, is their best chance to collapse our national power grid and take us down, perhaps permanently, she says, end quote. So in short, this is a scenario, a coordinated assault on America and or our allied nations that's described in this report that could instantly result in the collapse of Western society as it has been known, and directly thereafter, you know what's going to happen, right? Anarchy fills the street, martial law is imposed, but what else happens? A national cry fills the air for salvation from chaos. Now, is that a perfect recipe through which the man of sin could step in with wondrous answers to our overnight problems by offering some unknown method for restoring social order? In a minute, I want to get your take on something here, Steve. How could the Antichrist mark those who would be allowed to function in his kingdom following a catastrophic cyber or EMP attack like I just described that would result in widespread damage to essential structures? I mean, that'd be the first question, right? Wouldn't electrical, computerized systems be needed online for these implantable high-tech marks to function at least in any way as we understand them? I know in our in our war college, I know that superpowers like the United States, we obviously have some kind of top secret response that either is being devised or already has been devised for such an event. But I also know that that's mostly in place really just to protect the president and those who are closest to them, and outside of that, it's going to be every man for himself. But what if something beyond human comprehension is planned by the Antichrist, that these grids all go down? Now, how can his system function? I'm asking this rhetorical question because I noticed one day that when the Bible describes how this final world leader is going to deceive mankind with lying signs and wonders, 2 Thessalonians, and appear at a time when there are fearful sights and great signs from heaven, which we were talking about a moment ago, Luke 21:11, you can't help note that there is something very specific and interesting about the wording in Scripture that implies how the man of sin is going to be directly associated with electricity and people's need of shelter. First of all, the heaven that's mentioned there in Luke 21:11, fearful sights and great signs from heaven, that's not the throne room of God. It's not talking about the throne room of God as in that kind of heaven. That's the word oranos, which was also known as the cosmos by ancient Hebrews. This is the vaulted expanse of the sky, but this is where the clouds and the tempest gather, and specifically for them, it was where electrical energy, where lightning is produced. In fact, they named so many of their deities, Zeus and so many others, as that god that lives in the cosmos, in that area, and they always directly connected him with the ability to produce electrical energy or lightning. Also recall how in Nehemiah 9, remember when the prophet spoke of more than one heaven? He saw the heaven, but then he saw the heavens of heavens. Paul comes from that same angle in 2 Corinthians in the New Testament, where he says, I knew a man in Christ above 14 years ago who was caught up to the third heaven. And scholars believe that when Paul was referring to that third heaven, he was talking about he was coming from his formal education as a Pharisee concerning these three different heavens, but one that was a domain of air, the cosmos, the oranos, the height that is controlled by Beelzebul, the lord of the height, but Beelzebul is also the god of electricity, the god of lightning. Now, that was oranos, or the cosmos, but in the Bible, let me get back to my thoughts here, both the false prophet and the Antichrist are described as being aligned with the power of that celestial realm, from which it says in Revelation, they are able to call down fire. Now, that could be talking about literal fire, but as some have noted, it also could be talking about electricity. The prophet Daniel tells us that the Antichrist belief system will honor a strange alien god. We talked about that last time in Exo Vaticana, and that he appears related, however, also to electricity and lightning. Daniel 11:38-39. In his estate, in the Antichrist place, or in his estate, shall he honor the god of fortresses, and a god whom his fathers knew not shall he honor, with gold and silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange god, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. End quote. We talked about some of the parts of that prophecy last time that stand out as very unusual, and how it can literally be interpreted as a strange alien god. What we didn't talk about, however, is how this phrase, God of forces, also called the God of fortresses, that is directly connected in history to Baal Shaman, who was an ancient deity that was worshipped throughout the Middle East, especially in Canaan and Phoenicia, but also, guys, get this, directly connected to Syria, where we are right now trying to fulfill prophecy. And this deity was the greatest angel of electrical energy, natural electrical and high voltage discharges. So here's the question I guess I'm asking. Could it imply that the Antichrist could come on the world overnight like some supernatural version of Nikola Tesla, with some wonder-creating wireless electricity transmission system capable of repowering the world? I know in the beginning that sounds astonishing, but you have to think of what will it take for the Antichrist to bring basically the world to its knees, and to cause all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond. I probably should say here real quick, for those who don't know who the inventor Nikola Tesla was, he was an electrical engineer. He was known all around the world. He patented all these kind of devices. He had tremendous knowledge of alternating current, AC, electrical supply systems. But before he died in the 1940s, he actually intended a proof of concept demonstration of the very kind of thing that I'm discussing now, an intercontinental system that would provide transatlantic wireless power transmissions for electricity, telephones, broadcasting, and some believe he would have accomplished it, but his project was defunded midstream because, well, pressure was brought on, and some believe by skullduggery involving electricity contracts from his competitor, who he once worked for, but Thomas Edison's General Electric Company. So there was some skullduggery. It defunded his big tower project, but he was going to illustrate wireless electrical intercontinental ability. So could the Antichrist come in that way? And before I get your answer, also note just one final thing, how that the Hebrew word translated forces there in Daniel is ma'ot, but that refers to a deity that can provide human protection in the form of strong housing or places of safety, refuge, protection. But it adds to this question whether the Antichrist could appear as a false savior of humanity immediately following a wide-scale cyber attack or EMP-type event that brings down national power grids and leaves people desperate for common necessities like electricity and housing. I just find it very interesting that when you start looking into the Hebrew and Greek language describing the appearance of the Antichrist, there are numerous and redundant references that connect him to electricity. And so it is one of several possibilities. I'd like to get your feedback on that because it's something that's been on my mind a lot, and then I'll talk about a couple of other that people may more easily be able to wrap their minds around.
Well, I would like to address that one issue because, look, we know from the basis of Hegel, the Hegelian dialectic, you create the problem, you provide the solution, and providing the solution, you bring about the change. When the lights go out in the city and things have turned real, you can fill in the word with that, people will do anything because darkness is more, how do I say this? Darkness not only scares people, a lot of people just don't like the dark, and they're uncomfortable with it, but the scripture talks about that, here you go, Tom, the time, Jesus' word, for the day comes when no man can work. With a cyber attack, with the potential for a complete shutdown of the electrical grid, and I'm talking intentional. And by the way, it's Nicholas Tesla, T-E-S-L-A, okay? I'm only saying that because Tesla, as some people say, but they look it up, for those who want to go and check it out, I wrote about Tesla. By the way, Stan Dale went to Tesla's laboratory and understands Tesla physics, I would say as well as anybody, but the people that inherited, just a quick aside, the people that really took Tesla seriously with his geodynamics and the ability to basically create death rays, etc. He basically stated he could literally destroy the Earth by achieving the right harmonic, in other words, split it. And what he was really saying is he could split the atom by using harmonics, and when fission moved from just a bombardment with a high explosive to laser fission and laser fusion, then light became that which could detonate. Interesting. Let me share this, and this will answer. Probably the greatest discovery, I think, in theoretical physics took place, or at least announced, on the 17th. And did you see that? The physicists have discovered a jewel-like geometric object that dramatically simplifies calculations of particle interactions and challenges the notion that space and time are fundamental components of reality. This is interesting. It is called, you ready for this? It is called an amplituhedron. Amplituhedron. And it looks like a diamond, and it looks like facets are almost, it looks like what's called a Munsell color chart. Or you could even see those paint charts where everything blends into everything. In other words, obviously we're talking about string theory. But going beyond that, the idea of controlling electricity. See, the ancients did possess electricity. And by the way, Barack Obama, Barak is another word for lightning, okay? Mm-hmm. And remember this, when Scripture, Jesus said he saw Lucifer fall like, I beheld, fall like lightning. That's the word we're talking about. And the word lightning, and even Jesus uses the word lightning because people, he says, as the lightning goes from the east to the west, so will the time of the Son of Man. So when the devil is a copycat, he's going to try and assimilate through technology that he and his adepts and the non-human intelligence, the fallen angels, and their earthly spawn, okay, control. They're going to use that to technologically deceive mankind. So, Tom, what you're saying there, and here's where it gets interesting, the sounds, if you take sound, remember in the book of Genesis, and God said, let there be light. So the verse of sound, if you will, and all these sounds, I maintain that every sound that we are hearing, seeing, experiencing, and that people are plugged in their iPods or whatever, iPhones, this music, that music, this is fundamentally altering the created, if you will, thinking capabilities of the brain that God gave us in our free will, and I do believe he gave us free will. You can't have the word choose and deny free will. The point is, and I got one guy that always sends me emails, there is no such thing as free will. He's wrong, he's wrong, he's wrong. The bottom line is that we're seeing now technology. The ancients possessed a knowledge of electricity. And I even posted from Epic Times, the editor sent me a story about how the ancient South Americans could literally almost liquefy rock. Did you see that article?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not.
What we're talking about, you're proposing a question. I'm answering the question. Absolutely. Well, angel tech, fallen angel technology. I once had a general, special operations, tell me, pretty much, Steve, every operation is to find the ancient technology and its weaponry and to be able to use it by those in authority to destroy humanity. And he said, my job, these are the guys I called mighty men and women of valor, is to keep that kind of stuff from falling into their hands. And that's a good thing that there are still people out there. But again, the whole, if you will, the whole vibrational frequency, all of that which God put into place as barriers is being accosted, attacked, it's being sublimated, it's being taken apart, and so therefore, it's almost like, if you will, the sonic barriers, the light barriers that once kept the powers of darkness at bay are now being messed with. HARP is nothing more than one of 72 ionospheric heaters. There are 72 goetic demons, the goetic gates. Interesting enough, there are 72 imams and 72 virgins. Well, what's fascinating to me about all this stuff, we're talking about an end-time recipe for technological magic, and that magic will be applied to deceive people. So instantaneously, if the world, Tom, is put into a blackout for 3 days, some guy comes on the scene, can give us the free energy we all know already exists, then I think people are going to fall down, worship him, kiss his feet, and other parts of his anatomy. I think they're going to, and some people say, that's very offensive. Well, I got news for you. If you want to see offense, figure out and factor in 5.5 billion people. So when you start to concern yourself with that, ladies and gentlemen, then you can take issue with the smallest minutia that would trip anybody. And I say this, Tom, because what you and I are talking about, can I say this? And here's a good term for tonight. We'll claim it tonight, okay? We are talking about quantum madness being interjected into our reality to destroy marvelously, as the Scripture says, and to make war on the saints. I hope I've answered your question.
Oh, and so much more than I could have even imagined. The fact that I would put you on the spot and you would have that just in your head illustrates why you're Steve Quayle and I'm Tom Horn. But Steve, did we get a preview earlier this year of an entity that has supernatural Tesla? And thank you for correcting. I probably said it backwards, Tulsa or something stupid.
Yes, you did. But it's important so no one will take you on and say, he doesn't even know the guy. I mean, I get that. If I say the wrong word, trust me, it's like the entire dictionary criticana of critics, that's another word, is thrown. So I'm just trying to save you the headache of having to deal with...
I get around you and Gary Stearman, and then I just want to pack my bags and go home anyway.
Well, I got news for you. Then we'd be there waiting for you, because we get around you and we go, what does Tom have to say? So, listen, that's to the glory of God. Can I tell everybody something? This isn't a mutual embrace of each other's, cheeks. This is, and I'm sorry, that's offensive to some people. Who cares? The people that everything's offensive to don't get offended by the factors that we're talking about tonight. Tom, we're talking about Jesus said there's never been a time like it, nor will be again. And except the days be short, and there be no flesh left alive. And when I talk about molecular dissemblers, and we talk about everything from phasers, and all the words that you hear in science fiction are already adopted by the scientific, what I call black science, or what Russ calls black physics. These entities know how to control mankind. Look at if everything is on an iPad or in the voiceover infrasonic realm on your television, and you're being continually programmed, then critical thinking has gone out the door. Entertainment and continual drowning out the sounds. By the way, I posted something that everyone must read on my website about the 2,700 satellites that their purpose beyond just their military application is to literally bombard the airwaves to take away the beautiful harmony, the beautiful symphony, the clear channel sounds of God's wonderful voice in creation. I got news for you. If all creation sings an exaltation of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, then I can say this: it must drive the devil nuts that he has to, he used heavy metal, and I'm not a heavy metal fan, to drown out the pure voice, the lovely voice of creation. And I'm telling you this, that's going to be a chapter in something I'm writing, okay? There's a giveaway.
Well, what had taken my mind back to all of this, the Hebrew and Greek connections to Antichrist as somehow being connected to electrical power and lightning. What originally kind of, made me go back and do that was how early this year, in February, lightning struck St. Peter's Basilica twice immediately following the resignation of Pope Benedict the 16th. And now that may have been a coincidence. It might not have meant anything to other people. But I couldn't help but think the timing of those two lightning bolts on that particular building at Vatican City at that exact time was fairly mathematically improbable, especially kind of being a student of Roman myth and how their omens had everything in the world to do with lightning and the god of lightning and the god of electricity, who would show his approval of the new leader of an institution or a country, which is actually where we take the word inaugurate, because we took that from the Roman augurs, who would approve. And also, Steve, it wasn't just the lightning, it was also the sound. It was thunder and lightning that was the most important auspice, a sign from Jupiter, the father of Apollo, Zeus being the Greek version, that he was watching and that he approved. And anyway, that kind of took my mind back to this whole idea, and I wondered, why would the Antichrist be associated with electricity and lightning? And then you get to watching these experts out there right now who are staying up at night concerned that, it's probably far more fragile than the American citizen needs to know as to how that could happen in the blink of an eye and literally take us back into the Dark Ages. Now, say one final thing about this, because I know I want to make these other 2 points really fast so I don't spend this much time. But when you look at the appearance of the beast and the Antichrist in the book of Revelation, there's another thing that could be connected to this, in that it seems to preface the moment of that moment when the Antichrist initiates his beastly system. It seems to preface it with some kind of a military attack that results in the destruction or the death, if you will, and then seemingly miraculous, rapid recovery of what many expositors believe is both the man and the global superpower that he represents. So when you look at that premise, you have the healing of a man and or the nation, either by himself or both, the healing of that deadly wound, and it causes all the world, it says, to worship the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and to proclaim who is like unto the beast and who is able to make war with him. So some type of military event occurs that leads to some type of death, both of the man and or the supernation he represents, and it seems to be so rapidly resolved. I mean, the lights just suddenly come back on, and the whole world stands back, and they marvel, and they say, who is like him? And then it goes right back into the same kind of text. It's followed by a vision of power and fire from the heavens, connected to the implementation of the mark of the beast. He doeth great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and he deceives them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles. And the text just goes on and immediately leads to, and then he causes all, both small and great. Those are all right in Revelation 13, 4 through 18, just one line right after the other, where you have that connection between what appears to be the god of electricity. Something catastrophic happens, literally overnight. They're back on their feet again, and all the world marvels and specifically says, who is like them and who can make war with them? So That's one possibility. Let me just give you a couple more really fast. What could happen overnight that could set in motion the implementation of the mark of the beast? A second scenario is the collapse of the global economy. And this is something that we all know right now. We are standing, I mean, we're kicking the stones over the edge of the precipice right now. And recently, the United States National Intelligence Council, the NIC, working with the European Union's Institute for Security Studies, they joined forces. And it's an interesting study to produce an assessment of the long-term prospects for global governance frameworks. In essence, you could look at their report as they're essentially saying what could set in motion the need for a global government. Well, that is identical to what could set in motion the need for the end-time institution of the Antichrist, a global government. Their report's called Global Governance 2025 at a Critical Juncture. People can Google that and download the PDF and read it for themselves. It was written by the top intelligence agency of the United States working with the top intelligence agencies of Europe. And what they're doing is they're assessing the leading intercontinental perils that could endanger the collective administration or the global governance of things that are important to all of us at an international level. But from the very beginning of their report, there's a subsection called Scenario 1, Barely Keeping Afloat. And in that, they acknowledge how crisis, including the current financial institutions of the world, are being served what they call ad hoc, temporary frameworks that are devised to avert the most threatening aspects. In other words, such as the United States printing money for which we have no gold reserves, we're in the red, we don't produce enough revenue to even pay the bill, so we're going deeper in debt every single day. And just this week, we're going to raise the ceiling once again, and the president's out there saying things about it. People are talking about it. But if you read Global Governance 2025, brighter minds are saying these are synthetic economic tricks. They're only temporarily sustaining what is ultimately an unsustainable financial system that at any moment, in fact, many experts in the field are astonished, right, that we've even made it this far. I mean, they've been predicting around the world, we're talking experts in the field, predicting a devastating crash for the stock market. They're hoping it won't happen, but they know that history, experience, facts available today, they know that everything's being artificially sustained, and that is only a matter of time before this house of cards crumbles. Now, more conspiratorially, or perhaps I should say more accurately and transparently, some people suggest that something sinister in that regard is actually being planned. In other words, a global stock market crash for the near future that is intentional, that we are right where we are because there is an ordo ad chaos that has intentionally been set in motion by the Illuminatis and their cohorts, and that ultimately, in a flash, what could happen overnight that could bring the world to its knees so that an antichrist system could be implemented? What could happen? They believe that instantly, what happens? Thousands of banks, literally within 36 hours or less, are closed all around the world. They've seized most people's personal assets and confiscate gold and silver if they can find it. Eliminate cash. All of this is already being illustrated in other countries right now, where banks essentially say it was your money yesterday, it's ours today. That could happen. In the United States right now, we're taking people's retirement dollars. It doesn't belong to the Fed, but they're taking it. It can happen in one day, especially if you have a federally sanctioned declared emergency that's activated by a presidential executive order. Now, I'm not trying to frighten nobody. I'm just telling you, get a grip on the kind of reality that we are living in today. Because after the financial institutions of the world crumble, if they do, it would be a snap for a worldwide monetary system.
Tom, if I
can restructured into one.
Tom, if I can chime in here, this is Doug Hagman. Steve and V, the guerrilla economist, had come on several times over the past several months. And you opened the program, both you and Tom, you and Steve. We were talking about Syria a little bit with respect to the geopolitical nature of things. Out of the three, and I know we have not gotten to number three yet, but out of the three scenarios that you mentioned, my investigation, being a student, and I use this respectfully, of both you and Steve, looking at Steve's research and what he's done, and Tom, your research and what you've done, I've got to say this. The war in Syria, to me, based on the research I've concluded and my contacts, my military and intelligence contacts, is being done at the orders of the Illuminati. We are actually, the United States is really a captured operation, working on at the behest of the Saudis, of the Qataris, at that level, and behind those people are the international bankers. If we go hot, well, I shouldn't say if, when we go hot with Syria, and we will, because that objective has never changed. Although I believe Pastor Langford and Steve and our programs, as well as other alternative media exposés, have pushed back the timetable. When that Syrian war goes hot, the regional chaos will turn into a global conflict that'll affect the oil, the energy, and the only thing that the U.S. dollar is backed by is the free flow of energy. It's not backed by gold or silver or anything other tangible element except the promise of oil, the promise of energy, the promise of unfettered access to that energy to the West. Overnight, and this is about the only thing that really makes sense to me, overnight we could see the Syrian situation give way to a banking collapse, banking holiday, the killing off of the dollar, not a collapse, I should say, but an intentional murdering of the dollar, as Timothy Geithner expressed to Kyle Bass back in 2010, which was their intent. Gone is the petrodollar. And then in order to buy, sell, barter, exchange, whatever, there must be some level of consistency, which will be the mark of the beast. So in other words, it'll be the hunger, fright, cold, lack of shelter, lack of food, lack of water that will bring people to that point. But it's going to be the result of a quickly cascading event to bring us to that point. I just wanted to throw that in there because
I think, Doug, let me interrupt here because that is as concise and clear, by the way, well done, and absolute definitive understanding. I want to say something. V is going on Coast to Coast 924 next week, and he's going to cover this stuff. And for those of you that don't know V, he's a financial analyst. He is by, and this is not flattery, he is a genius. He has been prescient and prophetic. And the point is he's going to be on with George Norrie on 924, I think, for the whole show, or at least a couple hours. So I want everyone to listen to him. But what he basically sent me today, somebody had asked, well, why was he talking about October? You just said something powerful, Doug. If people are not, how should I say this, believing that God is answering the collective prayer and the collective time of fasting that we've done on Hagman and Hagman worldwide, then they are blind to the hand, the staying hand of evil that God has been so gracious to grant us, because they are going to kill the dollar. It's going to be instantaneous. And we've already seen reverse hypothecation. Let me just make that really simple. You can just steal anything that's put into a bank because a bank no longer owes you money. In essence, your money becomes theirs, and they've changed terms. So they've set up the legal precedent. Now, Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil.